The clamour at Westminster for MPs to have a vote on the government's Brexit strategy before triggering the formal process for leaving the EU will reach the floor of the House tomorrow in a Labour-led debate. But what will that strategy actually be? There is one aspect of Britain's relationship with Brussels on which Theresa May has been deafeningly silent: the billions we contribute to EU coffers every year. Could that be because we won't be getting them back anytime soon? Our political editor, Nick Watt, has the story.
Every week, we send £350 million to Brussels. Money that's wasted.
Remember all that talk about £350 million during the referendum campaign and how it would be coming back after we left the EU? Well, have you noticed that hardly anyone in government is talking about that now?
So to everyone here this morning, and the millions beyond, where the levers...
When Theresa May laid out her red lines for Brexit at last week's Tory conference, she talked about sovereignty and immigration, but pointedly said nothing about getting her money back. Newsnight has learnt that senior Whitehall officials believe the UK may have to make generous contributions to the EU even after Brexit, as a way of securing preferential trading terms. One member of the Cabinet has told Newsnight that the UK is likely to have to pay quite a lot to secure access to the single market. An insider has described this as the dog that so far hasn't barked. First, they will have to contend with vote leave campaigners.
Laws, borders, money. When it comes to taking back control, those were the holy trinity of the Brexit campaign. You can't have one without the other. That's what we campaigned for, and that's why the British people voted leave. We have all the bargaining chips. There is no need for Theresa May to capitulate on this. And if she does try and capitulate on this, I think she might very well soon find herself out of a job, because that is not the Brexit that the British people voted for. And of course, it's not what even her own backbenchers and some of her cabinet team voted for.
Some members of the Brexit Secretary David Davis's camp have said the UK should no longer make payments to the EU. But Newsnight understands that officials are wondering whether the UK may end up paying into a fund to help develop new EU member states in Eastern Europe. Poland, which currently wants to preserve the rights of its citizens to work in the UK, may decide it has more to gain from financial support.
If we wanted to have access to parts of the single market, say the passporting for our financial services industry, I imagine we'd have to pay something close to what Norway pays.
Charles Grant is convinced that Theresa May is keeping her options open.
The fact that Theresa May has singled out the fact that we will not accept the European Court of Justice rulings, that we will restrict immigration, but she said nothing about budget contributions, makes me think she may well be prepared to make such contributions, not to the EU budget itself, but to a development fund for Eastern Europe that would be quasi-EU budget.
£20 billion.
Some vote leave campaigners are sanguine about financial contributions. They say they could help to avoid what has been dubbed a cliff-edge exit.
It may well be the case that we have to contribute, I think, for a transition period to stabilise their budget for maybe 3 to 5 years. But the point is that at the end of that 5 years, we can say no. We don't want to put a penny more into your kitty. We don't want to contribute to your budget, and that choice will be with us.
But the chairman of the Commons Treasury Select Committee says Britain may need to make a payment in perpetuity.
We want a high degree of access to the single market, in my view. To fall back immediately on WTO rules would risk an economic shock, and certainly an economic downturn, given the high degree of trade integration at the moment between Britain and the EU.
It was mixed signals for the Prime Minister this week as she met fellow EU leaders. Back home, one of the leading lights of the vote leave camp told Newsnight they would be comfortable with the UK paying as much as half of its current contributions. No doubt there will be give and take in the negotiations, as Theresa May has said.
Nick Watt reporting. Well, the government has told us they're not providing a running commentary on their negotiating position, but we've been very clear that all decisions about taxpayers' money should be made in Britain. Well, joining us now is Redwood MP, a leading Brexit campaigner, fair to say a hard Brexiteer. Good evening, John Redwood. First of all, there's all this talk still about what Brexit was actually for. What do you think it's actually for?
Well, it was very clear. We voted to leave. That's what it said on the ballot paper. And the consistent slogan of the Vote Leave campaign was to take back control. And when we were asked for a little bit more detail, we always itemised borders and money and laws.
Yes, yeah, the taking back control of the money was very clear.
What we were voting for, yes.
So
the money was extremely clear because it was a matter of contention how much exactly it was. But
well,
everybody
there was
knew
a matter
that
of
we
contention.
wanted to take back the full amount.
Yes, but this question of the 350 million a week, it was brandished on buses, it was all talked about. It's not being talked about at all now.
Well, because quite rightly, the Prime Minister is not going to give you a running commentary. I think it's very silly of the BBC to constantly run these stories.
She mentioned immigration, she mentioned sovereignty.
We haven't sent the letter yet. There are no substantive negotiations on anything at the moment because we haven't even notified them formally we are leaving, which she said she's going to do probably early in the new year, which will be very good. But you can't make up these stories just because some officials in Whitehall are unhappy.
But they're not made up.
Unhappy. No, the officials in Whitehall, I'm sure, exist, and I'm sure they wanted to stay in, and they're now putting out this kind of information. But it's not. They're not speaking for the government. And as you've rightly reported, the government is not going to provide a running commentary, and there is absolutely not a shred of evidence that the government wishes to give away this money. And do you realise that if we gave away the full net contribution we're
10
making,
billion,
that would be twice as much as the amount we'd have to pay in tariffs. So that would be a particularly stupid deal, wouldn't it?
Let's just be clear, though. You say they're not giving a running commentary. She talked in her speech very clearly about sovereignty. She talked about immigration. She did not talk about the money at all.
Well,
so it's only a running commentary. It's only a running commentary as far as it goes.
Well,
what do you think
part
of the idea of any contribution?
Obviously, you're not sovereign if you have to keep on paying money away to some foreign power, are you?
Well, it depends how you're paying. If you're paying it to the power, if you're paying it into a different fund, it's not necessarily money. It's suggested that's going into the EU budget. It's going into a fund. What do you think of that?
You're now at a stupid level of detail, which is not on the government's agenda and is not part of any very informal discussions.
But surely, if there was to be a situation where we dealt with free movement of people, and also where we had access to the single market...
You mean we had control of it?
Yeah, we had control of it. And we had access to the single market in return for a contribution,
but we're going to have access to the single market anyway. You know, everybody has access to the single market. America and China have access to the single market. They don't have any special deals with the European Union, but they have access to the single market.
There may be a particular balance. Well, there may be a particular balance on goods. You know, 44% of more. You know, we export to the EU. But on the question of financial services, which is of huge importance to the British economy, and passporting, there would have to be a deal.
Well, not necessarily. There are various ways that this can be done. I mean, the United States of America has perfectly good service access to the European market, and there's the doctrine of equivalence, which is something we could explore if they want to take the passports away. But do you realise there are many more passports from the continent into London, because we have the biggest market, than passports out of London onto the continent? So why do all these continentals want to lose their passports? You know, the ones I talk to actually want to keep their passports, and I think we will generously say to them they can keep their passports and then we'll have our own.
But if it is a negotiation, it has to be a negotiation. If it is a negotiation...
It doesn't have to be a negotiation, no.
Well, I know you think that actually we should just send a letter and get out. I know that.
Well, and offer them very generously to carry on trading exactly as we are at the moment. They have a massive surplus with us, so it clearly suits them very well, and I think when they reflect on it, the member states are very likely to say, yes, that's what they want. Is Mrs Merkel really going to go around Germany ahead of her election saying, I'm recommending a 10% tariff on German cars? I don't think she's going to be saying that. Is Monsieur Hollande, very low in the polls, going to say to French agriculture, I'm really recommending that you pay a very high tariff into Britain when you sell your cheeses and your wine? There's no way they're going to want to do that.
If there is a negotiation and it comes down to a contribution, a financial contribution into, for example, the development of Eastern European countries.
There's need to pay them money to buy their imports.
This is your view, but there are other views in government about this. You accept that. And
well, there are officials who have a different view,
and there are politicians who have different views of the way of Brexit.
Well, I don't think you'll find the Brexit ministers have a different view to the extent they're allowed to express one, but they obviously are bound by great responsibility. If the Brexit ministers,
if Davis, Fox and Johnson, the three Brexiteers, if they fail to get a deal without contributions, financial contributions from Britain into an EU fund for a particular reason, Should they resign if they do not get, as you would put it, a clean Brexit?
This is just a set of silly questions. This is not what
Those are
we're
questions
talking
that people
about.
want to hear answered.
Yes, but we haven't even sent the letter, and I've made it very clear that there is no need to pay a lot of money into the EU budget because they want to sell us their goods, you know?
John Redwood, thank you.